Here we are again. I'm Katie Kinsman. I'm going to be doing an audio recording of my latest blog post, and it's around a subject that has I'm not sure, fascinated me, bothered me, stuck in my craw wrong. I don't know, for as long as I can remember. And it's about the whole tortured artist trope. And part of the reason why I had been thinking about it, because I have been ruminating a lot on the concept of contentment and what leads a person to be content. And I am separating contentment from happiness, which will be explained in another blog post. But I am wondering about this trope, this tortured artist trope, as it intersects with my thoughts on contentment. There's some intersection there. I was thinking about it as the big Venn diagram. And I had recently watched a video, a vlog by Shanspeare. And I have links for Shanspeare in my blog post, so you can go directly to her video and watch it. It's called, your artwork isn't good because you're suffering. the tortured artist trope. And there was something about it that really it hit me in a way that I wasn't expecting. And part of that, I think, has to do with the fact that she was so honest in her video about her mental illness and how it affects her and her ability to create, that I felt as though I needed to do something with it. I think I watched the video at least 4 times. Actually, even took notes. I'm sitting here. I've got my little notes that I took throughout it for points of reference, and I'm gonna deviate at some points a lot from my blog post here. But, let's just kind of get into it, I guess. As I said, recently I've watched a YouTube video by Shanspeare entitled "Your Art Isn't Better Because You're Suffering: The Tortured Artist Trope." And it got me thinking about my life as an artist, my feelings of contentment and certain aspects of my life, with the bits and pieces of my life that I still kind of struggle with. And some of these things I struggle with on a daily basis. Her video left me a lot to chew on. So I went back, I rewatched, and I had to do something with it. So, the tortured artist trope and me. A not-so-love story. There are a few things in the universe that I will definitively say that I hate, and this is one of them. I hate this trope. It bothers me since I was in middle school, and I didn't quite understand why the sly cutting commentary about the way I thought or behaved or the artwork I made would really meant anything. I mean, I thought that, well, you're an artist, so you're, kind of supposed to be weird, is more or less how the whole tortured artist trope kind of landed in my brain. Artists are weird. Fine. Okay, whatever. I was weird long before anyone called me an artist, so yeah, okay, whatever. It wasn't until I was in high school that I began to understand the prevalence of this whole tortured artist trope, and I think I kind of bought into it to a certain degree. I was in high school after all, and I needed to be just nonconformist enough to actually conform, if that makes any sense. It should also be noted, I was beginning to experience some of my first bouts of severe depression during high school as well. But to conform, I kept that all to myself as best I could and relied on my closest friends to help buoy me mentally and emotionally. And I think it should be said that in retrospect, my bouts of depression did come out. I didn't hide them as well as I thought I did. But I think that they were interpreted more as Katie's being difficult. Katie's too sensitive. Katie doesn't like people controlling her. And, I think that's how it was interpreted by those around me. And this was in the mid 80s when this was going on. So I'm not saying that it wasn't, depression wasn't known of, but it wasn't really something that anyone was concerned about in my family for me. And by the time I was in art school, my bouts of depression were a regular occurrence. I always knew that when I was feeling like really good and creating art, I could always feel those hands on my ankles, and they'd start gripping tighter and tighter, ready to pull me down into a depressive mode. And I would think, enjoy it while you can, because you know it's gonna suck so fucking much very, very soon. I hated existing this way, dreading the inevitable. I would sometimes manage to tarnish those non-depressive amounts of time as well, occasionally to the point where I would begin to even resent the non-depressive modes just as much as the full-blown depressive modes, because the non-depressive modes made me realize that life was okay, and then I really liked it. And then I knew I was going to have to go in it and back into the depression. So it's like, why even let me not be depressed? This just sucks. But if I was still buying into the trope of the tortured artist, I was just living the life. I mean, this was how artists are, right? Because I was depressed and moody and couldn't manage to create anything marginally good when I was in a full-blown mental depressive spiral, the pain made my art real. It made it good. The anguish and the self-flagellation gave my art the stuff that would make it stand the test of time. Ozymandias, here I come. And seriously, no. It was a hells to the nopety nope nopes. I cringe when I look at that work now. Now, one of the things that I did in art school was I was majoring in visual communications, graphic design, and taking tons of illustration and fine arts printmaking courses. I took bookbinding. And there were some who held tight to the idea that being in graphic design meant that I wasn't creating real art. No, please note that I am making little quotation marks, little air quotes. I was in the field only to make money as a graphic designer, as well as the idea that somehow graphic design took no actual creativity. I beg to differ. I remember some smartass in a typography course when I was really struggling with was I gonna make it through graphic design or not, actually saying out loud that I should go to the pot lab and make pots. I do remember his name, and I won't say it here because I don't want to embarrass him. His rejoinders were not spectacular. He wasn't good at it. Anyway, I've struggled with whether or not the artwork I create is real or not since my middle 20s. The hallowed halls of Heron High were a microcosm of larger society's feelings and beliefs about what art is and what art is decidedly not. The romanticized artists seemed to be winning, even in art school, which was so weird to me. I mean, I was the art weirdo in my high school, but somehow didn't rise to that same level in an actual art school full of art students, while at the same time going through insane bouts of depression. All the while, I just couldn't make any of this checkbook add up for me at all. Cut to the late 1990s, and a definitive diagnosis by a mental health professional of clinical depression and prescribed medication to mitigate the bone-crushing bouts of depression I'd been experiencing for about 6 years. And I'm thankful for that. And I have had some relapses, and I feel fortunate that I've had people around me who have said, yo, something's up. Something's going on. And that sometimes required some adjustments to medications and some therapy sessions. So, I'm good. I'm still really good. So back to my blog post. New Mexico is the land of enchantment. As I grew older and began to move away from two-dimensional artwork personally and professionally, the gulf between the art I was creating and how people in society viewed it and interpreted my artwork became huge. I picked up a needle and thread and started to work with fabric and embroidery. It felt natural to me. I felt connected to myself and the women in my family, living and non-living, by sewing. I began to create dolls that I had always wanted to create when I was a little girl. Creating them made me happy. Being within my own mind while creating gave me a sense of contentment that I had so long been separated from, that it was like getting to be myself in a way that I never could even as a child. It's really very hard to explain, but how people viewed my work, what they said to me regarding my artwork, how my artwork was relegated to the arts and crafts, again, we're getting air quotes here, pavilion at the state fair, while the real art was shown in a separate gallery. This really bugged me, then began to chew on me quite a bit, like in a really bad way. And I've explored the ideas of concepts of the doll when seen only as a toy before, so I'm not going to get all into all of that here. Suffice it to say that while I was wishing my artwork was art, with real art, society at large saw my artwork as craft. The gatekeepers decreed that one was worthy of a gallery exhibition while the other was not. Gatekeepers' delight. Shanspeare highlighted some writers and researchers in her video whose work had attempted to define what serious art is and isn't. Disturbingly, these definitions seem rooted in that romanticized idea that good art, real art, comes from intense suffering. One of the people that she cited is Edward Sankowski. He uses the whole tortured artist with mental illness to distinguish between high art, which he calls serious, and popular art, which is non-serious. Now, I have cited these sources in my written blog, so if you want to go and take a dive yourself and read some of these papers, they're not really long. Interesting reads, and I recommend them, so you can kind of make up your own mind about this. I did a little poking around to see what kind of bona fides this Sandowski guy has. In particular, I was looking to see whether or not he had any kind of background in the visual arts, and then frankly any kind of background in any art. Did he have a hobby or anything? Color me surprised that he had no such personal experience that I could find. He seemed to be more into the theory and philosophy of art, with the quotations around it, in his writing, rather than the individuals who actually create the art. And that's fine. It just seems weird to have what I do teased apart and examined in such a way that completely ignores me as the individual, or worse, takes one facet of two facets of my life, one being that I am mentally ill, I have a mental illness, and then I create art, and that's it, stripping me of everything else. And that really bothered me. This is kind of like me trying to write a book about math because I know how to count. It bugs. Honestly, the researchers Shanspeare cited sent me down a total reading rat hole, completely different from the reading rainbow with LeVar Burton. I found myself agreeing with some of them, like Catherine Lord, and a little with John Passmore. I especially liked Lord's take that to be considered serious art, quote, it must be public, it must be imaginative, and it must exhibit craftsmanship. But by the end of reading that, I was kind of pissy and angry. I mean, really like frustrated, like a toddler. Even though I was interested in what I was reading, art is something that I never seen, and art is never something I get tired of. I could just start to feel a headache coming on at my temples after reading a J. Ryan Napier article, and I had to be done with the reading. I had to put it down. So I put the book down. What was making me uncomfortable is that I was falling into a trope trap of my own making. While I was reading, I was trying to origami flat pack my artwork into one of those, more of the definitions of, or frameworks of the aforementioned writers and theorists. This need to conform to everyone else's cookie-cutter definition of art or artist is like a screwy siren song to some emotionally needy, very needy part of my being, which is especially strange because the thought of this, a search for belonging, validation, or contentment, seems to be a never-ending journey for me, and it bugs the ever-loving shit out of me sometimes. Why do I need to conform to someone else's definition of who I am and how I create. And that's where capitalism comes in, but I'm not going to get into that right now because that's just messy and ugly and will make me cry. What's worse is this kind of searching leads me further away from a feeling of contentment with my life as it relates to my artwork, largely because I don't feel as though I will fit anywhere or in any prefabbed category. And that means that neither does my artwork. My husband calls this behavior my mind axle wrapping. I'll just spiral and get myself so upset if I get stuck on a thought, a concept, an idea. So I had to just put it all down and walk away. After all, and this is one of my favorites, Andy Warhol once said, "Don't think about making art, just get it done. Let everyone else decide whether it's good or bad, whether they love it or they hate it, and while they're deciding, make even more art." I'm the happiest and most content when creating art. And where does that leave me then? I've been using the very talented Sarah Anderson's comment regarding artists and mental health and art creation a lot. I've posted it a lot, posted it everywhere. It's sublimely simple in illustrating how I, as an artist with depression, creates art. I'm not talking about real art or great art or serious art or whatever you think art is either. When I'm in a full-blown bout of depression, creating art ceases. I don't feel like anything, so I cannot create anything. When I come out of the depression, that's when I can create because I can feel again. Sarah Anderson's comic is, depressed artist does not create work. Happy artist creates work. And society is still using this romantic era BS holdover from the 1850s. Peak era, romantic era was 1850 to 1800 to 1850. So, being deeply depressed, as I have been in the past, is like being in the middle of nothingness. Nothing is real. Nothing in the entire universe matters. I don't want to eat because I wasn't hungry. It's as if I was dead. And I knew I was dead. I couldn't touch things or be a part of anything. And when it was really bad, and I mean really, really huge Godzilla-sized bad, I contemplated just checking out and ending it all. Because everything was just nothing. So why stick around? I didn't make art. I didn't make any art during those periods. And what I did make was not something I would show anyone. And I had a hard time with knowing it existed at all, if that makes any sense. Because I have been there, because I have stood on that edge, and I have looked down with no fear, no anger, no happiness, no longing, no resentment, no emotion at all, and thought, why not? When I experienced the tortured artist trope in real life, coming in out of the mouth of someone, I honestly wish I could grab that person who hasn't experienced any mental illness by the throat and dangle them over the edge a little bit. Just let them know that they can't feel the ground beneath their toes, and then maybe just toss them into that nothingness, just for a few minutes. And I motherfucking you that they would never speak so flippantly about mental illness again. And yeah, I'm that much of a dick. So the whole trope, it still affects me, and it still affects my art practice. Shanspeare mentions art therapy, or artists who work on their art as a personal method of therapy. I know that I very much fall into that group. I've known that for years. However, I'm a person who also takes her meds every day, and I don't miss doses. I refrain from drinking alcohol as well, as it doesn't mix well with my medications. And that also means any kind of recreational imbibing of illicit substances isn't something that I indulge in either. My husband is the meal planner and the cook, and he makes sure that I eat well. And yes, there's some exercise in there too, along with getting adequate and regular sleep. A very big deal for me as a chronic insomniac prior to being diagnosed. For me, the reward of keeping my depression under control is that I get to make art all the time. I work from home in a tiny studio space, otherwise known as the Midden, that is right down the hall from my husband's desk where he writes. I generally work 7 days a week, and I don't make a lot of money. But I don't have to ask anyone if I can go to the bathroom, nor do I have to have a principal attempting to feel like a giant pile of shit for existing in his school as an art teacher. In the movie Amsterdam, which I highly recommend if you hadn't seen it, the character Bert is at the docks with Valerie and Harold, and they're like getting ready to get on a boat and leave the United States. And Valerie says something to the effect that she just wants to live her little life and make art and love the person she wants to love. That's all she wants. That's all she wants out of life. That series of lines also has resonated with me. And to me, that is the definition of contentment for me right here, right now. Now, there's more to this that I wanted to discuss. And I'm not exactly sure how to do it. I wanted to talk a little bit about the intersectionality of mental illness and artistry, or being an artist and having a mental illness. Now, if you're going by this romantic era or romanticism, ideas, these are the artists like, William Blake and Eugene Delacroix and Percy Bysshe Shelley and Melville and Coleridge and Keats and Poe and Hugo and Byron, all those big romantics, that there had to be some sort of pain that caused them to then create something that was beautiful or real or serious in their art. And I'm not saying that those people didn't do those things. I do know that Goya suffered from chronic mercury poisoning, which guess what he didn't do when he was ill from the mercury poisoning? He didn't create artwork. And even contemporary artists like Kusama, who is an artist that I know of, and I know that she has spoken a bit about her mental health journey, her mental health state, in conjunction with her work and using it as therapy. But what I don't like, what drives me personally kind of over the edge, is that it's perceived by some, when you come across this trope, that the artist must have something that is wrong with them, and then they create something out of that tragedy. And particularly when you're talking about mental illness, it does such a great disservice. And I'm wondering if part of this is, I'm looking at this through the lens of an American who remembers seeing the movie Rain Man, where you have a person who's autistic who can do all these fantastical things. It's not a prerequisite for being a creative person. There is some thought that has been given to those who are more sensitive emotionally and mentally may have an outlet within the arts, but that is not by any stretch of the imagination a prerequisite for being an artist. I say this as a person who is a depressive, who is also an artist. But this is as regards the artwork that they create, and whether it is serious artwork or non-serious artwork. It was Sankowski that was talking about whether the distinction between high art being serious artwork and popular art as non-serious. Now, he was making a distinction between artists more of the romantic period. Again, look at Goya, Francisco Goya, and popular artists like Andy Warhol. And the part that starts to kind of bite at me is he isn't in particular looking at the context in which the art was created. When was Lord Byron writing poetry? It's gonna be different than the poetry that was written in the 1980s. Context matters. And when you take the creation of art and add things to it like seriousness or real or high or art with a capital A, and you do that in conjunction with an assumption that the person who is creating the artwork is suffering from some sort of illness, and that could be physical as well as emotional, but in particular we're looking at mental illness, then it's dangerous, because then you are not only highlighting something about their life that may or may not be influencing their work. Again, look at Vincent van Gogh. Vincent van Gogh painted flowers. He did paint some things that were not very happy as well, but the thing that you think about when you think about his work is these bright flowers. When you look at Picasso's Blue Period, he was not a happy man. But when you are saying that there must be suffering for the person to create real artwork, then you are dismissing a whole lot of other artists who work very hard to figure out how to create in spite of any sort of problems that they may have mentally, physically, or emotionally. You're holding those up as something to be admired and not for the right reason, if that makes any sense. It comes off as being so disingenuous. And I look specifically at an artist in the last decade or so that's gotten a lot of press, Yayoi Kusama, a Japanese artist, and I know of her work. It's not particularly work that I enjoy a great deal. That's not to say it's not good artwork. It's just not to my taste. She also has some mental health issues, and I sometimes wonder, the same people I've heard disdain a mentally ill person who's homeless on the streets in the United States, praising Kusama to heaven and back, that, you know, in spite of her mental illness, she can go on and do these things, and she just lives through all of this and turns it all into art. And, you know, it's feeding that trope again, and it just makes me so angry. And it's so dismissive of those people who do have mental illness and are perhaps living on the street and don't have something that you want, because there's also an intersectionality that we're not talking about here. There's the intersectionality of making money, and I'm not saying that a modern artist like Kusama does not deserve to make money by making her art. Yes, she does. Absolutely. But when you're folding in these dangerous tropes and then popularizing it, and it's dangerous to me. And it seems very sketch and icky when it's all linked with capitalism and making money, because that then renders Kusama and her work as a flavor of the month, the year, the decade, whatever. And the money will be made until there can't be any more money made, and then she's no longer it anymore. So those are some of the things that I have been thinking about, and it makes me angry. And again, it's just so weird to talk about this as someone who does struggle with depression and mental issues, and I don't want anyone to think that, you know, that don't buy my work because I have mental health issues. Don't buy it just because I do. It's a weird place to be as an artist. And like I said, Shanspeare just opened up this whole like squiggly can of worms for me about this. And I'm sure it's not the last time I'll talk about this, but that's just some of my thoughts about the issue. And like I said, I'll revisit it again. I will see you guys on the 19th of February. That's the next time I'll be releasing another auditory blog post. I like that. So thank you for listening, and I hope you'll be back again.